Hey everyone, Madeline here from the B&H marketing team. We are back and we have lovely guest Jen Edney on the line with us. Welcome, Jen. Jen is literally joining us as she is mid-sail. She's about to start the second leg of her race. She's in Portugal right now. So she's on the road. There may be some background noise wherever she is at. So, please stay on and stay tuned with her through that. If there's any technical difficulties, just be prepared for that. Jen Edney is from Nebraska, but that did not stop her from becoming an avid sailor, traveler, photographer, and filmmaker. We actually met at Eddie Adams, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. But I've also seen Jen teach through the summit workshops, a class through the female lens it's called, and those are great workshops. If you don't know of those, you should definitely check them out. Jen has been named one of the top 9 female adventure photographers by National Geographic. She's an amazing speaker. I basically cry every single time I listen to her. She's super inspirational. Welcome, Jen. Hey.
Hey, how's
How
it going?
are you? How's everything?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. So I'm going to let you get to your presentation. So are you able to share your screen now?
I am. Yeah, so.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
And her presentation is called Back to Our Roots. So thank you. I'm going to turn my camera off and without further ado.
Uh-oh. I just lost my.
Yeah, take your time. Sometimes
okay.
there's some tech.
Just been dealing with some technical difficulties. Okay, so.
I see it. I see your screen.
You see
yep.
it?
See it.
I can't see. Okay, so yeah, as Maddie said, I'm in Portugal right now, and I'm on the second leg, or about to start the second leg of the Ocean Race Europe. And so what I'm going to do is kind of start from basically where I was 3 years ago, and it's the buildup of the last 12 years of my career in what I call my Everest, and it was to participate in the Volvo Ocean Race, which is now called the Ocean Race. And right now we're doing a little bit of a preview of it before the next race in 22-23. So my dream, I guess I would say my 12-year, it was a 12-year journey and 6-year dream, was to do the Volvo Ocean Race, because for me it was like the perfect combination of competition, world-class competition, human adventure, and also carries a greater message with it. So this was from 2017, 2018, where I had, reached this Everest in my career, and it was just an amazing place to be. Got to meet so many wonderful people and have some wonderful experiences. I sailed on board. It was my job. To explain that a little bit, my job was to tell the story of these sailors, because it's an offshore race. And so the only way to bring the story to the viewers was to have us embedded with the sailors. So we lived with them, and we weren't allowed to sail, but we were able to live on board and tell their story. And as you can imagine, it was pretty crazy. And throughout this presentation, you'll see the various stages of my equipment. So if you have any questions about what I use now or what I've used in the past, it might age me a little bit. But this is just me, on board. And this was in the Southern Ocean, probably the roughest and toughest experience I've ever had, but also pretty magical when you think about how many people have actually been in the Southern Ocean, and watching these sailors compete in this environment is just like nothing I've ever seen before. It's just incredible. Being able to witness it and document it is a blessing. It's just pretty crazy. And as you can imagine, sometimes dreams fall short. And I had a pretty bad head injury during this leg, but I'm okay now. But it kind of cut my dream a little short. and I was able to continue the race, but just not in the capacity that I'd hoped for. But we did win that leg, which was really cool. And, you know, I'm just in awe of my teammates and everything that they do. And I love, this is just the perfect job. So I'm going to go back to the beginning. And this is where, you know, when Maddie talks about my talk is about back to our roots and building relationships with athletes, I think it's applicable for almost everyone in any kind of sport that you shoot and anything that you do. And is building relationships with your athletes, building relationships with the people who you'll be working with. It can make a huge difference in your work and the intimacy that you can get with your athletes, or just that little extra that you can get. So going back to the beginning, I was working as a photojournalist at the Ventura County Star in California back before newspapers kind of went away. And one of my daily assignments was to photograph Zach Sunderland, who was a 16-year-old who was planning to try to be the youngest kid to sail around the world solo, which was pretty crazy. I don't think at that time, I think no one had done it in 10 years. And so it was a pretty lofty goal for him at 16 to sail by himself around the world. And I was tasked to photograph him just for the day in Ventura. But that grew into me then following him around the world after I met him and his family, and they needed someone to document it. And at that point in my life, I was able to kind of just go and do it, but I couldn't be on board with him. So I had to fly or eventually sail to some of his locations. But it was this story that really, I guess, propelled me into this career, this onboard lifestyle that I'm shooting in this and telling the adventure story with sport, because I followed him for a year to tell his story. And he completed it, which is pretty cool. And as this makes me laugh. This is before GoPros, and so I'm mounting a DSLR on the top of a spreader because I needed to try to get photos of Zach solo sailing, which was really difficult because I couldn't be on board. So trying to find unique ways to do that was a challenge. But we were able to get a few shots. He just had to turn the camera on. That was the thing, but we were able to get some shots of him. These are just a few lifestyle shots from his journey. And so while I was documenting his story, I ended up I was traveling on a budget. And so when I was in South Africa, I needed to get to the States, but cheaply. And so I ended up meeting a delivery crew who was delivering a boat from the factory to Florida, and they needed an extra crew member. And so I, said yes. Said, we can't pay you, but it won't cost you anything. And so here's the skipper, and he was a sailing instructor at the time, but also, and so I could learn how to sail. And I agreed. Had I known anything about sailing at this time, I probably wouldn't have said yes, because I crossed the ocean for the first time on a 30-foot, it wasn't a sailboat, but a 30-foot catamaran. And you can imagine my parents, when I called them and said, hey, I'm not going to be home in 3 days. I'm going to be hopping on a boat with this guy and this girl that you don't know and sailing at sea for 6 weeks. I'll text you from the sat phone every couple days. My mom still doesn't let me live that one down, but they've gotten used to it by now. So this is, my start of documenting on board. I learned how to sail. I was just documenting along the way and kind of created this niche that I didn't know would carry me through my career. But because I was a photojournalist, and there was a lot of time out there, I just started taking pictures and documenting what we were seeing, catching dinner, going through the Panama Canal, just life on board, doing the dishes, nighttime, shower time. Yeah, just documenting it. So little did I know that, so one of the stops was in Cape Town with Zach, but the next one of the stops that we had to stop when I was photographing him around the world, he had to pull into Puerto Vallarta, Mexico to fix some sails on his boat. And while we were there, the people who run the sail loft, they said, hey, Jen, you should come back in like March or April and photograph this sailing regatta. And the picture they painted for me at the time was just like a cruising regatta, and you can come, you can stay with us, and it's fun. And so I said okay, and so I went down to Mexico, and little did I know that I was walking into a 3-week sailing event, and I didn't know anything about sailing at this time. So it was big boats, little boats, Olympic class sailing, everything. J24s, which doesn't mean a lot to a lot of people. But at the time, I didn't know what that meant either. Just 3 weeks of sailing, and so I was able to stay. And the local photographer needed some help, and so I started jumping in the water to take pictures, and quickly became known as the crazy girl in the water with the helmet. But just shot everything from J24s to on board. People were letting me on board because of my experience offshore, which was pretty unique in the racing world at that time, because you could be a liability. So unless you kind of knew what you were doing, but a lot of these crews just let me come on board and let me taught me where to be and what to do. Really just I couldn't imagine at that time now what that has done for my career and the relationships I've built there along the way. And these relationships will come full circle now to where I'm at in Portugal, but that will come soon. So they just, people let me on board, let me drive the boat sometimes. As you can see, my gear has evolved. I don't even know why I was wearing a snorkel. This was quite often my perch. People would see me. This would be in between races, shooting in the water. I did shoot from chase boats too, but I was often in the water. But shooting windsurfing, kiteboarding, and I didn't know at this time, but all these athletes that I was working with, now I didn't know that I would see on the Olympic stage years later, and it's been incredible to grow with these athletes. And this is where I got my start in Mexico. I call it my birthplace, my sailing birthplace, where my original family of sailing is. So after this will come back full circle to where I'm at now, but I'm going to continue. So after this, my career kind of really, once you get into this environment and you start meeting people, this is, where relationships come in, you start saying, hey, you should come here, you should come shoot this, let me introduce you to someone. And I was pretty open to all of these things at the time. And so with Zach's story, I ended up developing a relationship with the editor or a photographer from Yacht magazine, which is a big yacht magazine in Europe, because they were writing a story on him, but they needed photos, and I was the only one with photos. So that relationship led to 20 or so stories with that writer and that magazine, which really propelled me into the sailing world and helped me learn more about it, because I didn't know the levels of sailing and how far it could go. And so this is from the America's Cup. Some of you might have heard of it. Usually most people know the America's Cup or the Volvo Ocean Race or the Ocean Race. But I was working an editorial assignment with him in Italy, and then a friend of mine said, hey, you should come over to Venice for the event. You can stay with us. And so I said, okay. And so I went over to Italy and learned how to shoot the America's Cup. It was pretty crazy, because this was at this time where all of the big sailors, where the professional sailors were, and where I really got to know the culture of sailing and how big it was. And it was just crazy. So I started to talk to some of the teams, build relationships with the media crew, say, hey, I have some ideas of shots that I would like to get. Is it possible to do these shots? And part of it was swimming in the water with these boats, which was a little crazy, but I, thought I'd ask, because, the worst answer you could get is no, but the best you could get is a yes. And so one of the teams said, okay, we were in Italy, but they were already racing. So they said, it won't work here, but, you can come, if you come to the next stopover in Newport, Rhode Island, then we can try. And I wasn't planning to go there, but I decided to go so I could get these photos to get myself there. It was the French team, and this Loic Perron is one of the most famous sailors, and I didn't know who he was at the time. And so I asked him, I said, hey, I had this idea. I would like to shoot your boat from the water. Is that too crazy? And I'd like to have you sail by me and sail over me. And, he, with a cigarette in hand, he's like, yeah, no problem. We can sail over you. We can sail by you. Like, no problem. Then I was like, crap, this is actually going to happen. Luckily, I was prepared and I had my gear in the trunk of my car. So I went and got it out and was on the rib about an hour later to take me out to photograph the boat. So they put me in the water. It was good conditions that day. And luckily I had a world-class, I'm sorry for the noise, a world-class driver or helmsman flying by me, because there's really short gap of safety here. So the first pass, they went by me. The second pass, they flew kind of near me, over me. And then the third one, they went straight over me. And I'm pretty sure I closed my eyes during this time, but it was quite an experience, and kind of a turning point in my career, because I think after this shoot, it was shared with their team and shared with people. And I think people, my peers and everyone, kind of started to take me a little more seriously. I think because I was also a little crazy. Just a picture to remember that day. And it was kind of cool that day because I got to sail with the team afterwards. But all of these steps were building relationships with teams and people that I say, like I wouldn't know would be stepping stones and building blocks to where I am now. So my next dream after doing this, working with the America's Cup, was the Volvo Ocean Race. And I just loved the aspect of it, like I said before, of the combination of this adventure and sport competition and telling the human story, and also sharing a bigger message to save, saving the oceans, and basically being ambassadors for the ocean and protecting the world as we sail around doing our sport. So going back to relationships, when I was working with the editor from the Yacht magazine, we were in San Francisco working on an editorial story, and we ended up meeting some people that one of her husband was at that time currently sailing on a boat called Maserati, and it was the same type of boat that would be sailing in the ocean, the Volvo Ocean Race. They were sailing around, they went from New York around Cape Horn to San Francisco, I think in like 47 days. Crazy. They were trying to smash a record that had previously been done, and they beat it by 10 days, but 47 days of sailing offshore. It's crazy. So I happened to be in San Francisco when her husband was arriving, and I met her, and she said, "Hey, do you want to come out on the boat to take pictures?" So I thought there'd probably be another team photographer or someone else out there. It was just me. And so we go out in San Francisco Bay, take pictures of their boat, of their arrival, and got to meet the crew. And one of the crew that I met that day, his name was Boris Herman. He would be my connection then for when I decided that I wanted to pursue the race. I knew that I needed time on board these boats just to get to know the boats, to see if I could handle it, because you'd be living on board for you'd be sailing for 18 to 20 days at a time. And I wanted to test myself out and see if I could do it. So I was asking him, "Hey, do you have any space on board?" I knew they were going to be doing a race. So I did some research, and I knew they were going to be doing a race from California to Hawaii, which is about 10 days. And he said they were full, but that I could join them to deliver the boat, which isn't race mode, but they have to get the boat sometimes from one place to the next. So they deliver it. And they said you could deliver the boat from Hawaii to the Philippines, which would be 20 days at sea. And I said, perfect. So I could hop on board and test myself out, basically try myself out. So basically just documenting life on board. Delivery mode is a little different than race mode. It's a little more laid back, but still able to capture the element on board, trying to use light, trying to use everything to my advantage to tell the story. The unique thing in this environment is, you're on 60 feet of space, and you're trying to find and create new content every day in such a small space that you're looking for personalities, you're looking for layers, you're looking for relationships, you're building a relationship with your crew. With this crew, I was the only female on board, which is the case in many of the jobs that I've been doing. But it took a few days for us to kind of find our rhythm. And I remember that at one point they were crossing, I don't know, a particular latitude, longitude line where they wanted me to take a photo. And it was a couple days in. And then they passed around a little bit of rum. We don't have too much alcohol on board, but like a little bit of rum and a cigar that we all just had a little bit. And just kind of that moment of camaraderie kind of solidified my position, where now I became more like a fly on the wall. They trusted me and just let me do my job, which really just changed the intimacy of the photos. And by intimacy, I just mean the feeling. You can see a little more emotion, you can see interactions, you can see just a little bit more when you get that trust from the athletes that you're working with, especially in this environment. So this trip really helped me train myself and decide, do I want to pursue this job? Because I knew it was going to be tough. No woman had ever done it at the time. And I just knew it was going to be a tough road ahead of me. And after I did this job, I said, okay, I want to pursue this. This is what I want to do. And, these guys were great to have me on board. And many of them are, I call my brothers today. So that leads me into where I am right now in Portugal. This is me right now with my team, Viva Mexico. And they are right now trying to be competing in the next the ocean race in 22-23. They're on that path to do that. And the really unique thing about their story is that the very first race in, I think, 1973-74, called the Whitbread, it was called the Whitbread then, Mexico competed and they won. And they have never competed, the country has never had a boat in the race until now. So there's a really cool legacy and history here, and really cool story. And then also for me, the full circle story that I was talking about in relationships is the skipper of the boat I met 12 years ago in Banderas Bay in Puerto Vallarta, when I first started shooting those pictures that I showed you in Mexico. Eric Brockman, I met him, he was sailing on one of the big boats with his father. And also I found out that a couple of my crew, my young crew, feel old, they remember me as teenagers sailing their lasers and their windsurfing. They remember me bobbing around with my red helmet. So it's really cool to be coming full circle. And because my dream originally kind of got cut short the first time, it's really nice to come back with my original sailing family to do another race. And having done it before, there's just that comfort level of kind of knowing what I'm doing. But I'm just extremely blessed to be able to tell their story. And so this is them leaving Acapulco. I love this moment, because this was the last time the boat will be in Acapulco in Mexico until the race finished in 2023. So it was a pretty emotional departure and moment for Eric, and for me to be able to capture this with my original sailing family. It makes me emotional, because it's a special full circle story here, and just showing the camaraderie between the crew, capturing the wildlife at sea. I love when dolphins come. I'm like a 5-year-old. I always get excited, always, never changes, and then I like to try to really find unique moments on board to try to show, okay, it's going to be wet, this is going to happen. I know the environment. I've lived in this for such a long time that I look for these moments where, Natalie needed to take a break from the water, and so she sat down, but trying to capture just a little bit more and show you what's happening in layers. If you watch my images, you'll see that I see in layers. So I see the action, but I try to really look beyond it and try to really tell you what's happening in the story, capturing relationships with the crew, quiet moments, off watch. They just came off watch. These crew work in 4-hour shifts, so they're on watch for 4 hours, off for 4 hours. They don't get a lot of sleep sometimes. And so capturing these kind of moments that really show the emotion. Your quiet time down below, that's my media desk. You can see she's one of the crew members is taking a look at the photos, but that's my office, which I'm currently in right now. Just another, just eating. Drones are now part of our storytelling. So we've got, all the tools with us to tell the story, be so self-sufficient to tell the story offshore, because there's no one else that can do that. And drones have been a really nice addition to be able to show more of the story. It's tough to manage all of the media and everything, but it's fun. This is at the nav station down below. And, this is for me, my biggest relationship that I have to have on board is with the navigators, usually because they're the ones filling me in on what's happening with the race, and we sit right next to each other. So that's a really important relationship to have, and just showing life on board. And I consider it a success for me when my crew kind of doesn't really notice that I was there. Oh, I didn't know you were there. I didn't know you were taking pictures. Showing sleeping quarters, funny moments, playing with light. I'll be playing with lights out there with, I got some Westcott J80 with me. So we trying to play out with some lights if they'll let me. But I like to just have fun with the light, with the elements, the moments. Leaving Acapulco, try to get details, close-ups, any different angle that I can. Most of these photos were just shot the last couple days offshore, so it's fun to be able to share these with you. It gets really wet out there. So if you have any questions about what I use to shoot, feel free to ask.
I have a question, Jen.
Yeah.
How do you navigate movement around the boat? Like, as far as I know, I've heard you speak about it before, but I know it probably, I mean, for me, even as an outsider, it seems like it might be really intimidating to even begin to know where to stand, and sort of how you have to be really in tune with the movements of the sailors and the crew to sort of know your position and how to, where to hold yourself.
Yeah, so that's a great question, because, as I've just kind of just thinking about the past, going back to Mexico and Banderas Bay, and really thinking about how special that time was. The crews on board were great at telling me, when I was okay with asking questions, like, I don't know where to be, I don't want to get in the way, so please tell me where to go. And so they would usually designate a sailor to kind of not handhold me, but tell me where I could go. And so I learned each boat has kind of their own places where you can be and where not to be, but you can kind of tell when you get on board. And particularly with these boats, when I first stepped on board with the Maserati trip, that's why I was learning, like, where is it safe to be, where is it not safe to be in certain conditions. And in these conditions, when it's really, really wet, there's a few less places you can be. You have to be attached to the lifeline and secure when you're in these conditions. But also when you're moving around, I liken it to a sloth. Like, everything takes a lot more time because you have a camera and you still got to be holding onto the boat and moving around. So you just have to, plan for that, to be moving around slowly.
And I imagine you don't, I imagine you don't switch out your lenses very often. So can you talk a little bit about, like, what your go-to setup is when you, like, step out onto the boat deck? Like, what do you have with you?
That's a good question too, because right now I was trying to decide. I was able to get some lenses to try out from Sony, and I think my go-to for sure this leg, especially in the water housing, would be the 24 to 105. It's a great range, so like for here I can get close up, and then I could always, I could get up to the skipper with that range. And with the Aquatech water housing that I'm testing out too, it has the zoom. So it's perfect for these conditions and having one lens.
And how are you liking the Sony so far? I know you're coming from a Nikon background.
Great. Yeah, this is my first time using it these last 5 days, and it's been wonderful. So
what was talk a little bit about the learning curve on that, like how going into the race, how much time did you spend getting to know the new camera system? Had you ever used it before?
I got it the day I left.
So, love it. Photojournalist for real.
So I've been troubleshooting it offshore in action. So it's been great. It's interesting when we in the race in 2017, we had to use Canon and Sony. So I did use the Sony then, but it's so different between all the camera systems. Just when you're in quick mode and you need to do something quickly, that's where in this environment, it's good to know, your gear, because even putting lenses on different ways and just little nuances like that are good to get to learn, maybe before you're in this environment. But I guess in this environment, it's great. This is where the testing comes in. So
have you ever dropped a camera, or like, like something unexpected on the boat happens and you're like flying? I can imagine it can get rough sometimes.
yeah, usually it's me and the camera that go. I haven't lost any yet, knock on wood. But in these conditions, for sure, you have to really take care of your gear, because even the saltwater air can cause corrosion. So you have to be diligent every day about washing it, wiping it down with alcohol wipes, and managing your gear, because it's moist in the air all the time too. So yeah, I don't know if there's any more questions we can. I'm just going to roll through some of the photos with my crew, and you can just kind of see how I work. I love to try to get everyone in one frame, as many faces as I can sometimes in these environments, and challenge myself. I always try to wake up before sunrise and stay up for sunset, just because that's when you can get some really nice light. And just, I'm always looking for moments, my crew, I'm looking for for eyes, I'm looking for emotions, I'm looking for anything that tells the story. We have some fun too. So yeah, I don't know, Maddie, is there any more questions you have rolling through?
Not as of now. I'm not seeing anything in the chat, but if anybody has any questions, YouTube or Zoom, feel free to drop those in for Jen. Jen, are these new images from last?
These are from the last 5 days. No one's seen them yet, so you guys get to.
Wow.
But yeah, so and just, I guess, going back to the relationships, I think that I've shot many different types of sports over the years, and I think it's just kind of the same almost with not just with sports, but anything you shoot. It's important to have your community and have your tribe and mentors. And I mean, I wouldn't be where I am today without the Summit community, and that's been my main educational source over the past. I was a student, I think, 5 or 6 times, and then I've been a faculty now for 5 years. But these communities are just priceless. And Eddie Adams, I wouldn't be where I am today without these communities and these people. And same within the sailing community. It's just cool to see everything coming full circle. And and I would say be patient, because it's taken me 12 years for some of my relationships to come full circle. But it can be a blessing when it happens, and you can create some really magical work when it does.
How do you deal, Jen, with a disappointed athlete? Have you ever had to deal with like somebody that, take a portrait of somebody that's, seems to be disappointed or just lost or something like that, when they may not want to have a camera in their face? How do you deal with that? Yeah,
I think that's the hardest part of this job in particular when we're racing, because you're going to have that, either we win or we don't. You're going to have that level of disappointment, and the challenges on board and the disappointment are really key. That's, if you're able to build that trust with your crew and your athletes, usually they'll trust you to manage that. And I kind of tell them, if you really, this is more for video, but if you really don't want to talk to the camera, just put your hand up. I won't be offended, because sometimes it's just, not the right time. But I try to be respectful and engage that with each crew member on their threshold. But again, that kind of just takes time when you're with them. And it's part of the story, but it's also the hardest part of the story to tell. So I just try to be respectful in that moment.
Awesome. And what do you have? What are
Yeah.
your future plans? Like, where do you see yourself in 5 years from now? Do you see yourself continuing to do this type of work? I mean, I know it probably can be incredibly taxing on your body. So how do you feel? What do you feel like your future plans are in terms of, being a photographer?
Well, with this, one more in me. If team makes, when my team makes it, I have one more race in me as far as this role goes. But I see after that, I love teaching, and I would love that to be a big part of my career. I would love to, train both men and women, but I would really love to see more women pop up in this kind of work. I'm not really sure where they are or why. Hey, if you're out there, message me. I'm trying to find you. I'd love to see more women in the role and be able to train them, but both men and women. I love the job, and I would love to help raise the next generation of OBRs and sailing media. And personally, I'm getting more into lighting. I've just bought my first Westcott lighting kit, and so I have a few projects that I'll be trying to implement that, or include that in some of my sailing projects, in shooting sailing in ways that hasn't really been done before. This year, I can't say too much about that project right now, but those are some goals that I have. And at home, I'm going to start I have an adventure portrait business that I'm starting at home back in Nebraska, so I can do a little bit more work close to home, but apply all these techniques I use on my professional athletes with, my nieces and nephews or families or younger kids. So.
Is there any advice that you have in particular for those that are just getting into this, or people that are interested in getting into this type of work? What would you tell those people?
My dad told me once when I was younger and kind of getting started, he said, if there's something that you want to do or you want to learn, like, find who is the good at it or the best at it, and like ask them for dinner, which you can't maybe do now, but when I decided this is what I wanted to do, I did a lot of research on, the publications that I would want to work for and seeing what was out there, and then who to contact. And I did a lot of I sent emails to people and I got a lot of non-answers or no's, but then a few yeses that changed my career. So no matter what I think you want to shoot, what genre, it's, just do your research and kind of go after it. And also really look, like Maddie, you probably agree with me, but just kind of really look for those networking opportunities. One of my friends who I did my very first adventure workshop with in 2011, Crystal Wright. She's an amazing adventure photographer. I think we were the only two female students at the workshop at the time, but she and I have grown a lot together. And she told me early on in my sailing career, she said, try not to just be in one niche, meaning, kind of keep your door in other places. And so my world was the adventure world. So I would go to outdoor retailer shows with her and go to workshops and places where I could put myself in a position to meet editors, meet athletes, meet the people that I would maybe want to work with someday, and not be pushy. But eventually they would get to know you, and then you could, reach out to them. I think one example I have of that is like Marianne Potts. I wanted to meet from Nat Geo Adventure, and at a house party with my dog at a film festival. Like, she was petting my dog Nikon, and I think I got introduced to her, and that was it. We just had this short conversation, and then fast forward a couple years later, I was doing the Volvo Ocean Race, and she was wanting to do some media with it, and so we got to work together. But kind of just positioning yourself, but not being too pushy either. I don't know if that helps or makes sense, but
Totally.
reach out to people like me. We're here to help.
We do have a question from YouTube. How do you balance editing, ingesting images versus staying on deck to capture the action? Are there certain rhythmic downtimes?
Ooh, that's a good question. Sounds like it's from someone I might know. Um, we have deadlines when we're out there, and so I try also to work around those. Usually I try to go out on deck, like I try to get up for before sunrise and see if there's anything happening. You can kind of gauge when things are happening, especially when we're racing. If you keep in contact with in communication with the navigator and kind of know what's happening. So I'll go up on deck and work for a bit and try to break it up. So I go back down and ingest if I can, and then kind of do it in blocks throughout the day. And it just kind of depends on the day and when action's happening, but I try to break it up so that it's not a one big dump, at a certain time of day, because that just can take too long. To you don't want to be down below the whole time. So it changes, it fluctuates day to day, but I've learned how to manage that a little bit better and doing this longer.
And another question from YouTube from Tom Rio. Do you wear a harness on board or does it get in the way?
Oh yeah. So in any, on our boat, we have a rule at nighttime, when it gets dark, we wear a harness, or my life jacket, but I have a lifeline that a tether that I attach to the lifeline, especially in these conditions. There's a few throughout the boat. So I'll always be tethered in when I'm shooting, because I can't always hold on with, I got to use hands or brace myself to shoot. So I'm always attached. When it's calm and there's no wind, you don't need to be, but in rough conditions and at nighttime, for sure.
Awesome. I think that's it for the questions that we have now. I don't know. Are you done with your presentation? How are you doing on that?
Yeah, I'm just scrolling through some pictures with my team, so you can see, the different kinds of racing and moments on board. It's really kind of a unique experience too, because this new race, younger crew, so it's nice to see the relationships between the guys who've been doing the race for a while and the new generation that's coming in. It's a pretty special position to be able to document them and learning from the veterans. So yeah, I'm pretty much done. So if there's any more questions or anything else you want to talk about gear or.
Awesome. Yeah, we have a few more minutes. So if anyone in the audience has any last minute questions for Jen, please, now is the time. I want to encourage everybody to follow you on Instagram. I know your Instagram is Edney Epics, so we'll have somebody drop that into the chat so people can follow you. I'm sure people will stay, in tune with this next leg of your race. I'm really interested to see some photos, and it's been awesome seeing, getting to view some of these photos for the first time. Thank you so much for sharing those with us.
Thank you for letting me.
Yeah, this has been awesome. I know you were like, there's some background noise, you're literally on the go, but we love it. We appreciate it. And we really thank you for coming on and joining us for Sports Week. So thank you, Jen. Make sure you guys, like I said, follow her, stay in tune with what she's got going on. I know she is a great educator as well, so you might want to check out, some of the summit workshops and see what she's got coming up. Love this quote. Love these quotes that you've got going on here. Awesome stuff. Also, your website is really great too. Like, just, I don't know, the layout, your logo. I've heard you talk a little bit about sort of that process too, of like finding a logo, brand identity, and things like that in the Summit Workshops class. So that was really interesting to hear too. I love the photo, like the main photo on your site.
That was when I had to model at the workshop because the model didn't show up. So I had to go in front of the camera, which was a good learning experience to see what we put models through and our clients through.
Awesome. When I share my screen, I'll show everybody. I don't know, did somebody drop the link to your site? People definitely, yeah, right there. So go check that out. It's like, what an awesome shot with all the water and everything. So thank you so much, Jen. We really appreciate having you. This is really the conclusion of our sports week now. So I'm just going to, again, we're on here for a few more minutes. So if you have any last minute questions, please type them in the chat. Also, if something comes up after the fact, feel free to email us at bhshows@bhphoto.com. That email will go to either myself or one of my teammates. We'll get back to you usually within 24 hours or so. I do want to take a second to, if it's okay with you, Jen, share my screen. And I'm going to share my screen. That's that awesome image I was just talking about of Jen and her website. So definitely go check that out. We do have some Westcott deals currently. I know Jen was speaking a little bit about Westcott. All of these deals are on their website. Somebody will drop the link to that as well. Here's just kind of like a centralized location for all the information. So go check these out. They're also live on the B&H website. So you should see everything there. The FJ200, I believe it comes with a free Apollo softbox, great light modifier. Also, it's really good for people that don't know, check out our deal zone. Sometimes we have some really great, daily deals going on there. And like today, I mean, a monopod for 20 bucks, tripod, $12. Can't get any better than that. Also do want to, I know Jen's not a pro photo user, but we do have some pro photo deals going on right now. If you use the code, I believe it's BH Sports Pro Photo, we'll drop that in the chat until June 6th. We have 5% off all A10 studio flashes and 5% off the B10s and B10 pluses. Buy an A10, you also get this right here, this lovely light shaping kit, super portable, versatile, on the go for only $349. So be sure to check that out. And again, if you have any questions, please reach out to my team. Thank you guys so much for tuning in for Sports Week. It's been awesome to be your host. Madeline, and I'm signing off. So everybody enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you soon.